Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the first edition of the Wowcast podcast with the Wickham Way as your host. And I'm delighted to say that for the first time, not the first time, first of many, we are joined by James Richings from the Buxby Press.
Hello.
Thank you for joining me, James. How are you today? I should start by asking.
I'm very good, George, and I appreciate you having me on. Thank you. Initially tired after last night in more ways than one. It was a brilliant win. Reaction was up on the BFP website, and it was a brilliant way to get the first win. But yeah, I'm looking forward to what we've got lined up in store, and looking forward to what we can do against Burton on Saturday.
So it's quite nice actually that due to my own awful time management and nothing else, we can sit here and talk about a win. And like you say, it was a good win. And one of the things I've seen on Twitter, obviously this morning and last night, is that whilst we're all watching the same game, people can see it differently. I made a big fuss about. I thought Wickham were comfortable. I didn't really think Orient posed too much of a threat. And I suppose I just want your thoughts on whether you agreed or whether you thought that Wickham rode their luck at
times. I guess different parts of the game differentiate, really. I mean, I think for parts of the first half, I thought Wickham were the better side. I thought in my opinion, Orient's equaliser did come against a run of play. It was a good finish. Take nothing away from that. Very good goal. But I did think Wickham were quite unlucky to be pegged back. The second half started, having the man sent off obviously put us in the ascendancy, and we really, really did put a lot of pressure on Orient after that, and rightly so. But as Matt Bloomfield said yesterday, it was almost as if Orient were playing with the shackles off as soon as they went down to 10, and they didn't really have anything to fear. And that's when we had to have Max Streck pull off some fantastic saves. One notably from a Theo Archibald effort from about 25 yards, which I thought was destined for the top corner, but he managed to get a hand to it, which is a brilliant save. So I thought there were times where Wickham were the better side, but then in ebbs and flows, Orient did come back into the game, and at the end of it, you could actually argue that Orient were quite unlucky not to get an equaliser if Max didn't make those saves. But again, Wickham had chances. I think Dale Taylor was unlucky not to have at least two. I think their keeper Sam House had a few hairy moments, especially when Taylor closed him down on the odd time. I think Vokes also tried to close him down too. So I think overall Wickham did deserve the win, but take nothing away from Leyton Orient. They did play well for large parts of the second half. I know what you mean. I had a look on Twitter as well, and it was interesting to see. We all witnessed the same game, yet everyone had a different viewpoint. I think it's because when you go down to 10 men, people just naturally assume, oh, you're going to win, you've got an extra player. But that wasn't necessarily the case yesterday because Orient played quite well.
I suppose it is. It's one of those cliches in football that it's easier to play against 10 men. Thus is the rule. It gives you the advantage. But actually, I suppose, like you say, Orient sort of played without any fear. They had nothing to lose, which in a way, it did make it difficult for Wickham, especially when they were really piling on the pressure. And it was, I suppose, a good thing that we had the 2-goal lead.
Yes, very much so. Like you said, it was almost as if they didn't have anything to fear. And as the time went on, there were moments during the game I thought, oh, this does look quite hairy for Wickham, because I think there was about a 15-minute period, give or take, in the second half where it was just Leyton. I mean, they had a lot of the ball. And whilst Max Streck did make 3 very, very good saves, he wasn't really called into action that much, but it was all about the passing in and around the box. And every time they got the cross in, it was a case of, it was either Richard Keogh, who came on for Ryan Tafazoli, headed away. Joe Lowe was imperious on Tuesday night. It was absolutely fantastic. He did brilliantly. I think Kane Vincent-Young, his defensive abilities were very good. So Orient did look very dangerous, and obviously it resulted in them scoring 2 goals, their first 2 league goals of the season. But it's almost as if they were lacking this cutting edge on top of what they already had. Obviously, having a man sent off didn't exactly help. They had to change it around. They took one of their forwards off, put a defensive player on, so they weren't too exposed at the back, which ironically helped Wickham because Dale Taylor was completely unmarked for his tap-in to make it 3-1. So ebbs and flows. Wickham played well. Orient played well. Orient may argue that they were unfortunate not to get a point, but Wickham, in my eyes, did enough for the win because defensively they were sound. And considering what happened against Exeter, when you're 2-0 down inside 4 minutes, and then you go away to Lincoln, and then you concede 3 in 16 second half minutes, an improvement was needed. And that was very much the case on Tuesday night.
And I think one of the things that people will look towards is the scoreline. And whilst it's fantastic to score 3 goals, Wickham's first 3 goals of the season, people will look at the 2 goals conceded and argue that there are still question marks there. But I think if you look at the complexion of the game as a whole, I think other than the sort of the big 3x saves, Leyton Orient had 2 or 3 big chances and took them both.
Yeah, they really did. Bloomfield said last night in his press conference that a win's a win. We'll enjoy it, but we can't sit on it. He was already telling me as soon as the full-time whistle went within 5 minutes, he was thinking about Burton Albion and thinking about how we could improve on that. And we saw it yesterday, I think, for the first goal, unmarked in the box, which is poor. But then you look at it from the second goal, and on another day, that doesn't go under Max Drake's body. So, like you say, there are things to work on, which they obviously are trying to do. And there was an improvement yesterday because Wickham did look a lot more solid at the back. Again, I think that might have something to do with Joe Lowe coming in, and Bloomfield did say that he felt how did he word it? He said that before Lincoln, he was considering putting him in for Lincoln, but opted not to. And he said that he kind of felt like he might have done that retrospectively, put him in for Tuesday night's game, and he was absolutely sound. So, yeah, there were moments where Wickham did look a bit wobbly, but overall it was a solid performance, and improvements will continue to be made.
Yeah, and if we move on to sort of individual performances, you've teed up quite well there, James, because top of the list is obviously Joe Lowe. And obviously, it's easy for us to look at the 2 goals and the threat he had in their box. But in Wickham's box, he was colossal. I think he won everything that came his way. And I suppose it does beg the question of why did it take Bloom so long to give him the chance? He was really, really good in pre-season, really good at MK last Tuesday, and last night he did show his qualities. So I guess the question people are going to ask is why wasn't he in the team sooner? And is his place now cemented long term?
Well, one of the aspects is that, as Bloomfield alluded to yesterday, was like he's still a young boy. In his eyes, he's still very much making his way and forming his trade, and he didn't want to necessarily throw him straight into the deep end. For Exeter, did very well against MK, and he even said he was quite unfortunate not to make the starting lineup on Saturday against Lincoln. So we gave him his chance on Tuesday, and he very much took it. I think when you look at the centre-back options that Wickham have got, you've got Ryan Tafazoli, you've got Richard Keogh, you've got Chris Farino, you've now got Joe Lowe. You've got 4 very good centre-halves there, and it's actually a very good headache to have for Matt Bloomfield. So he's probably looking at every single player individually and looking at who Wickham have got on the weekend or in the midweek and think, okay, where can we utilize our strengths? Because every single team is going to be set up differently, and there are going to be strengths that Leyton Orient had that Burton won't have, and vice versa. So he's probably going to think, okay, well, if I play Joe Lowe on Tuesday night, it benefited us because he scored 2 goals. He had an imperious performance. But then he might think, okay, well, if Chris Farino's fit, he could actually fit into the system well if we play Burton Albion, because there could be a couple of Burton Albion players that he reckons Farino would be potentially suited up against. So I guess it just comes in the sense of who Wickham have got next. I know some might argue, well, wouldn't it make more sense to have a solid back 4 or back 3 that Wickham have for the duration of the season? Yes, but then when you've got 4 very good centre halves, you want to try and use them to their strengths as much as they can. I mean, Richard Keogh, he's an international centre back. You don't play for your country if you're not good enough. And in my article that I posted earlier on today, Bloomfield revealed yesterday that the 2 of them have been working after hours to improve one another. And according to the manager, Joe Lowe has been really, quote, picking Richard Keogh's brains, quote, to improve, which goes to show that not only, fine, if Richard Keogh doesn't start, it's not the end of the world because he could pass on his knowledge to Joe Lowe. But if Joe Lowe probably has a bad run in form, you've got a good deputy in Richard Keogh. We've got Ryan Tafazoli, who I think in the time he's been at Wycombe, he has started 75 league games and he's only come on as a sub for 5. So he's played 80 times, 75 as starter, 5 sub, which goes to show you how good he is for Wycombe. It's the only issue with Taff is that he just can't ever stay fit for a consistent basis. So I think yesterday was hopefully a turning point, but now it's about getting a run of form in. We got Burton on Saturday. They are somewhat struggling at the moment. They were this time last season, but managed to get themselves out of it. So it's a good headache to have when you've got 4 very good centre halves to choose from.
So I guess one more question before we move on to looking at Saturday. I need to apologise because it is a nasty question. But when Richard Keogh came on yesterday, I think the game changed in Wycombe's favour. Richard Keogh's ability to really slow the game down in Wycombe's favour and progress with the ball. I think it sort of for the first sort of 20 minutes after he came on, I think that's when Wycombe had their best spell of the game. So I wonder if Blooms looks at that as well and thinks that he needs to start sort of next weekend. But when there's 4 centre backs at the top of their game, which one do you sort of worry for the most that he might sort of lose his place in the team if the rest of them keep up their form?
That's a great question, isn't it? It's hard. That's a really hard question to answer because I guess it depends on the opponent who Wycombe have. As I mentioned earlier, it's all about the opposition. So you could have a team that will have 2 big front men up top. So ideally you would think, okay, if you've got 2 big front men up top, you could potentially, let's just say hypothetically, have Richard Keogh and Joe Lowe. You could just have them as the 2 centre backs. Why? Because Joe Lowe is very tall. I think he's 6'6", 6'7". He's an absolute unit. Then you've got Richard Keogh, who's 37 years old now, and he's got bags of experience. So you've got a good blend there. You may have 2, and then in another game you may have 2 other strikers. One of them could be quite zippy. So in that sense, you could put Chris Farino there. Why? Because Farino's young, he's really beefed up over the summer, and he's an absolute, again, another unit of a centre-back. And then you could potentially partner him up with Ryan Tafazoli, who's very much, I don't like using cliches, but he's very much like a Rolls Royce. He doesn't sprint, but he's very difficult to get the ball off. And in a way, he's kind of like that sort of ball-playing centre-half, which I guess in this day and age you kind of need. And it's very, very rare for Taft to ever make a mistake. He has one of the best starting ratios for a Wycombe defender in recent history. Like I mentioned earlier, 80 games, only 5 he's come on as a sub, which goes to show you how reliable he's been for Black Bloomfield and prior to that, Gareth Ainsworth. So when you have 4 very good centre halves, it is obviously going to be difficult to play them all. I know Wycombe currently play with a back 5, but I guess you can't put 4 centre backs there. Because you've got the likes of Boys on the left as a wing-back position. You've got Vincent Young on the right, who have done really, really well since coming in. So it's all about the opposition. I wouldn't be surprised if the back, well, I would say that because Taff could potentially be out for Saturday. But if he is fit, I wouldn't be surprised if he kept it the same. But then at the same time, I think Farino could potentially come back because what I believe is that he was only missing yesterday, and I also believe that that Jason McCarthy is due to be back as well from a wing-back position by the end of the month. So, in a way, these are good problems to have for Wycombe because they're getting all their defenders back. It's just a case of what Bloomfield thinks is right for the opponents that we face next.
I guess you're right. I suppose it does link back to what Bloomfield was saying earlier in some way. He wanted to have that versatility, but also enough options. And also, I guess Bob said it throughout the summer that it's one of the things that harmed Wycombe last season was that there was no sort of backup options. If your main player was out, then we were struggling, which is why we saw JJ and Grimmer play so many games at centre back. And they did a fine job, but they aren't out and out centre backs. So I think that Blooms has covered the bases well this summer, where he can play centre backs at centre backs. and that's a real positive. So if we look ahead to Burton on Saturday, James, and I think for a lot of people will agree that their start of the season has been very underwhelming. Look at their summer transfer business, and it was probably one of the best windows in the league. They currently sit at the bottom of the table, even below Wigan, who had their 8-point deduction. So really, a good opportunity for Wycombe to get a second League One of the season.
Very much so. You would think so, but then again, we can't take anything for granted in this league. I've already mentioned it. I mean, look at Exeter. Ahead of the summer, we were all buzzing for everything really. The amount of players that were coming in, the new kits, the new decorations and memorabilia being around the ground, and then within 7 minutes we're nearly 3-0 down, and we conceded after 24 seconds, and we conceded a penalty. Honestly, it was an absolute, you couldn't write it. So on paper, yes, you would think, right, Burton are struggling, they're bottom of the table, haven't had a good start. Wycombe getting a win on Tuesday night is no doubt going to be a massive morale boost and confidence boost, but we can't take anything for granted. I think very much in the sense of just take each game in isolation and just take it one game at a time. And Burton have got some very, very good players. I mean, the other day against Leicester in the Cup, yes, albeit they are beaten by a former Premier League side, but they gave Leicester a good run for their money for certain periods of the game. And if they're doing that to a side that are favourites to be promoted to the Premier League, who's to say they can't do something similar in to a team in the same league as them? So you would like to think yes, but at the same time, I think everyone needs to give every opponent that comes to Wycombe the respect that they deserve, because we are all on the same playing field, on the same wavelength. Burton at home, of course, last season was a first day of the season, really brilliant start. 3-0 up, I think, in the first 15 minutes or whatever it was, something like that. I think Anis Mehmeti ran the show. So lots of good memories at home against Burton as well. And of course, with Dale Taylor at Burton last season. So he may know some secrets that he can actually utilise in his game on Saturday. So on paper, it should be quite a tasty encounter.
Looking on paper, obviously, it's a good chance for Wycombe to get that win and to get a win on a Saturday. It's all about breaking that Saturday duck now, and I'm sure there's a curse there. But I've been looking at the Burton highlights on many games this season, and they have conceded really, really sloppy goals. And I guess in a way they haven't really been outplayed too much, but the goals they've conceded have been poor. Without sort of, how do I word this? Is that going to please Bloomfield? That even if Wycombe aren't at their best, they might still get some joy in front of goal because of Burton's early defensive woes.
Yes, you would think so. But Dino Marmio will not be happy with his side losing the last 4 games in which they've only scored 1. I think on Tuesday night they scored in the dying embers of the game, which I believe was their first goal of the season. So something has to give, and as we've seen so many times, it's the fixture where you think the team is going to win loses, which actually which kind of changes it. And I agree, the goals that Burton have conceded this season have been very sloppy, careless. They do have glimpses of magic, they really, really do. But I think if Wycombe just start off strong, really put them on the back burner, really put them on the back foot, it could potentially force Burton into making a few mistakes. I know Jamal Blackman came off in their recent game against Shrewsbury after, I think it was 25 minutes. So that's another issue for them. And whatever his injury was, we hope he has a speedy recovery, obviously being a former Wycombe man. But these are all headaches that Marmia really could do without. So on paper, yes, you would think it could be a home banker for Wycombe, which could end this horrid Saturday curse, which has been going on since February. But like I said, they've got some very good individual players in their team, Burton. I mean, they've got Brayford, we all know about him. They've got Bennett. They've got the likes of Carriole as well, who I believe was at Middlesbrough several years ago. So they've got some very good individual players. And I like to think that with Farino back in the squad as well, he only missed Tuesday with a precaution, Wycombe could be in good stead.
And like I said, so I know it is a good Burton team, and 3 games in, we can't take too much from their opening games. And I'm just way of the time, James. So I think we're gonna finish up in true sort of podcast and preview fashion. I'm gonna ask you for a score prediction.
Here we go.
If you can.
Every time I did a score prediction last season, Wickham always lost. So to anyone watching this, I give a prediction and Wickham lose. Don't blame me, blame George. But I am going to go for I think, fingers crossed, the Saturday curse will be over. And I'm going to go for a 3-1 Wickham win.
I like the sound of that, James. It's like we say, it's a good opportunity for Wickham to break that Saturday curse. And hopefully, I mean, I'm on holiday. So if you are there at the game, enjoy it. Make lots of noise. Thank you very much to James for joining me this afternoon.
Well, I was going to say, George, we can't go without hearing your prediction. So,
okay.
You can't leave me on the pedestal like that.
I was hoping you'd get all the punters and I could get away scot-free. Let's go for a 2-0 Wickham. Nice home clean sheet. Get the crowd on side once more, and get that second win of the season. So thank you very much for watching, everyone. Thank you as well to you, James, for joining me. And hopefully we'll be back next week to talk about another win and preview another game.